Right, I'm going to show you how I made some of the basses in my track Wriggler, which came out last month, I think, end of December or start of January, I don't even know. So there's quite a few layers to the basses on here, and I'm not going to be able to show you exactly how I made all of them because I chopped up some recordings from one of my my synths, my Mini Brute 2, fantastic synth by the way. But yeah, I'll show you kind of the basics of what I've done. So this is just a layer from Emperor, from one of his sample packs on his Patreon. You know, pretty simple. I'm pretty sure I've taken out the low end on it. Yeah, I've taken low end out. Just because I've layered every sound with another sub, which I'll move on to now. Where is it? Pattern 8. The sub is incredibly simple, like it doesn't need much to it at all. I'll show you if my FL Studio doesn't want to crash. There we go. Now, to be fair, I do use a different kind of sub these days in my tunes, but this one does a good job. So it's literally just the basic shapes sine wave with the third and fourth harmonic added in, and that just sounds, you know, like a sub. Nothing else to it, no effects, nothing. I've gone for 2 oscillators just to give it kind of maximum loudness, if you like. Random off, so that you don't get any changes in the sub. You want it to stay consistent. A little bit of extra attack and release as well, just so it doesn't have any like annoying clicks. And I suppose as well, good to mention, keep it in mono, so that it only plays one like note at a time. You don't get overlaying notes, and portamento quite high up as well, so you can kind of glide between notes nicely. And yeah, so that's literally just on its own in fully mono, because you want your sub to be nice and centered down the middle, with an EQ taking off the top end. Like any extra sort of you see around there, this sort of clicks, just getting rid of them, and kind of just ducking out in the low mids a bit, because that can get quite muddy sometimes, especially with the basses that it's layered with, which I'll move on to next, because this one is really interesting, this bass. I've used it in quite a few tunes, ones that you wouldn't have heard yet, they're unreleased, but it's a patch of my own called Weird Subby Squeal. I can't really remember how I made it at the time. I didn't go into it with any intention of making a specific sound. I was just kind of messing about one day and this was the result. I have taken out the low end on it because again it's layered with a sub, but I'm going to take that off so you can hear it how it should sound, like by itself. As you can see, it's very meaty. So what is this LFO doing? This is on the level of both oscillators. I mean, I'll tell you what, I'll strip back everything and we'll go in reverse from the start. That'll be easier to explain. So literally just this one oscillator. It's a basic sine wave with a bit of volume movement on it in the shape of this LFO, which at the moment is going incredibly slowly, because it's being modulated by this macro. As you can see, it speeds it up or down, which is where a lot of the further variations in the bass come later on in the track, which I'll talk about soon. But yeah, the second oscillator, again, just a sine wave, but this time pitched 3 octaves up and 4 semitones, and that 3 octaves is what gives it the kind of screechy high pitchedness to it. So I should mention as well, there's some what's called vibrato, if you like, on the fine tune. So you just have this triangle shaped LFO modulating the tune of that one. It gives it that pitch wobble. You can have it as quick or as slow as you like. see. I think it was at 2. But yeah, vibrato is great fun, especially when you start adding distortion and stuff into the mix. But yeah, the 4 semitones really give it quite a bit of character as well. If you listen without, I should mention as well, the volume's also being modulated by that. So both being modulated by the same LFO, with the rate of the LFO being modulated by this macro. I know that's a mouthful, but it does make sense in my head anyway. So you can kind of hear how the basic shape of the sound is there. It just doesn't have much crunch and stuff to it yet. I should also mention as well, there's FM from oscillator B to oscillator A. Without it, I mean, it'd probably sound still quite cool, but it's just, you need FM. It's so much better. You know. Yeah, what was I going to talk about next? Yeah, I wanted to go back to the semitones point. You can get sort of different tones out of it, but I really like the 4 semitones. But sometimes 7 works as well, but again, different semitones will work based off what key you're in and everything, because it's basically like adding an extra note, or playing your oscillator a different note up, isn't it, really? Yeah, 7 sounds pretty cool as well, but I stuck with 4. And yeah, so that's all being sent to the filter, just a standard low pass, literally no resonance on there, which is a surprise because I normally do use it, but I guess the sound didn't need it. And that's modulated by this same LFO again, because it kind of, when you speed it up, it kind of opens and closes the whole sound. But quite an important thing with this sound is actually the noise. Because the noise isn't routed through the filter, it has its own kind of separate movement to it. And it kind of stays constant, and yeah, when you distort it all together and it crushes it, it then kind of, the noise kind of does follow the rest of the bass, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's great little patch, this. So yeah, that's the whole oscillator section, really. It's very simple. It starts getting pretty funky in effects section. This reverb filter, you'll find it in miscellaneous. It's brilliant. You can get, wow, I didn't know you could save effects in Serum by clicking that. Well, you learn something new every day. Wow. Anyway, yeah, it's a miscellaneous filter, and it adds some great tones to things. So if I play it now without and then with, I know it kind of muddies it up and dusties it up, but it kind of works in the context of the tune, this bass. So a little bit hyper dimension on there next. I don't need to show you how that sounds, everyone knows how that sounds. It adds just that little bit of width to it. And then the distortion crunches it right up. Like, big time, you know. Where did that Serum go? Here we go. Yeah, the distortion just gives it every bit of like flavour that it needs. And a multi-band compressor just completely driving the gain, smoothing everything out. I'm surprised I didn't have this patch in mono, actually, to avoid any sort of overlapping notes, but I guess I didn't have the sub turned on either, did I? No. But yeah, that's that patch. It's very interesting. I don't know what all of this, so this one modulates the FM. The good thing about Serum and its macros is you assign these macros to whatever you want, and then you automate them in the DAW. I'm pointing at the screen there. You automate them as and how you want them to sort of fit in the tune. And yeah, it just adds like another flavour to the variations. Macro 3 is on the sync as well. Sync is another great thing to modulate. I mean, I can't show you both at the same time, but when you modulate FM and sync at the same time, through using automation clips, you get some wow results, but I'll show you that. Kind of hear the endless possibilities of variations. This interests me. Why did I modulate the octaves of oscillator B? What does that do? I think that's why. If you modulate it up ever so slightly, it just kind of gets almost in between, like an octave. Like I don't even know if I even use that at any point in the tune. I might have just left that macro on there. Macro 4 it was. Oh no, apparently I used it here. Let's have a listen to it in context here. Oh yeah, that little switch when the drums went a bit more steppy. That I did. Ignore how they sound as well. I think I've turned off a lot of the processing so that my CPU can handle it. But yeah, you can kind of bring that slightly lower octave in as a little, again, another transition, because Wriggler's has quite a long drop. It's quite a sort of intricate, technical sort of tune, and it needed all those variations in it. But yeah, that's the sort of basic design behind all the sounds. Like I said, I can't really show you how this sound was created, this response one, because it was just a long recording. I just wanted to turn the EQ back on of that serum, because where was it? 40. There you go. I don't want any lows interfering. But yeah, I can't show you how I made this sound, unfortunately, but I'll show you how I sort of placed it, if that makes sense. So yeah, the benefit, if I show you how long this audio file actually is, the benefit of doing really long audio recordings of you just messing around in a synth with some bass sounds, is that you can just chop them up and pick out little bits that you like, as and when, and it kind of helps you get more of a sort of similar sound across your own releases, like a consistent sound, because I've used this recording in at least 4 or 5 tunes, I think, probably even more. But yeah, I'll show you some more little snippets of it, so you can see kind of the thought process behind what you want to chop and where you want to place it. I forgot that the reverb automations. There you go. Yeah. So this is me literally just like messing around with the filter on the synth with different LFO speeds. You might recognise some of them basses from Supersonic that I released with FernQuest as well, because I use them in that. Yeah, so many sounds from that, and like I say, if you can pick out just like 3 or 4 little ones that kind of work in context with the rest of the tune. You don't have to do much sound design, you just stick it in and, you know, Bob's your uncle. So they are from 3 completely different sections of the same recording. Like, it's best to do lots of little chops rather than one long one, because if that was just hold up, if we put it back to how it was, if that was just that in the context of the tune, I mean, it might work, but it doesn't tell as much of a story. You get me? Whereas the other one, where you've chopped out little pieces, it's almost like they have their own reason for being there. Like this one talks to this one, which kind of transitions into that Reese. You know, and it's just kind of that throughout the whole tune, really. Like, just tons of little variations and stuff in kind of just random movements. Like, I don't really plan most of these sounds. Like, I just draw in a couple shapes on automation and stuff. And yeah, another thing I should mention as well is the pitch bend on it. So I'm modulating the pitch bend on the sub so that it kind of stays aligned with the rest of the sounds, because they're separate. Like, you can't get like an accurate you wouldn't want to just use like a straight pitch sub for these sounds, because they're kind of pitching up and down. So that was quite difficult. You have to kind of listen in and pitch it up and down. It's very subtle, but it just adds a bit more movement to it, you know. Turn the bloody drums off. There you go. You hear that? Probably won't hear it on the phone if you're listening on the phone, which you probably are, but yeah, the sub is quite an important piece to that. I won't really go through processing, because my processing chain in this song was kind of stupid. I don't really do it the same way these days, but I'll show you it anyway. It's just a compressor absolutely smashing that low end down, and then bringing it back up by expanding it, I think. Yeah, it's an expand mode. It's just a preset called clean low end. I use it quite a lot, to be fair. And then the famous Pultec EQ, doing what they call the Pultec punch, which is where you boost it by 4 decibels and then attenuate it by 4 decibels as well, and it kind of adds this unique curve to the EQ, if you like, and gives it a bit of flavour. You might be able to tell. Doing quite a lot to it, actually. And just decapitator, distorting the hell out of it, because that's what it does best. We all love a bit of decapitator. And then it's been quite heavily compressed, actually. About 6 decibels of compression almost. But it works, sounds good. And then Oxford Inflator, which at the time I was very new to this plugin and didn't really understand it properly. I was using it as a limiter, almost, which is completely wrong, but it kind of sounded good, so I went with it anyway. But yeah, it's absolutely boosting the signal on this, like big time. 9 decibels. If I take it off, it'll be really quiet. So you can kind of see how it would work as a limiter, but Oxford have an Oxford limiter plugin that you should use for that purpose. This is kind of more of a distortion. If I was using it, if I was to redo this tune, I'd use it around here in between the decapitator and the pull tech, and then have a limiter at the end. That's my advice. But yeah, what else can I talk about with the bass? I didn't really do much reverb modulation on it. I don't think there's even any standard reverb on there. There's some reverb. Where's that coming from? Is it on here? Don't tell me I used Serum's reverb. No. I actually don't know where that reverb's coming from, you know, because I've got a plate on here but it's not turned on. The shimmer there, the mix level is at 0 because that only comes in here. I don't know where the reverb's coming from, you know. I really don't know. Is it on the bass bus? I haven't got it on here, have I? The mystery reverb. Where has it gone? I'm just going to cycle through them. Aha, there it is. Yeah, so I've sent all of the basses to this one channel here, channel 42, and then I've done a reverb send. So in FL, if you want to set up a reverb send, you actually no, I'm not going to do that, but you'd right click, do sidechain to this track, and then open Fruity Send, and then send to the channel that you want it to go to, insert 46, and that way you can do like proper clean your reverb up, you know. A very big mid-range duck there on the reverb. I'll tell you what, there you go, we'll listen exclusively to the reverb if we turn it all the way up. It's very muddy, but it's only a short little reverb in room mode. Quite a lot of pre-delay on there, I notice. That's probably why it's so muddy. If I was to bring that back down, it would fair enough, I guess it worked at the time. But yeah, just kind of cleaned it up a bit. I really should have EQ'd this more in retrospect. Sort of nowadays I would have. Done something like that, because that way it would not interfere so much with the bass. However, one thing that I did do, which kind of eliminates the need for that anyway, is sidechaining it to itself, so that the reverb will only play when the bass isn't playing, if that makes sense. So it's not doing it at the minute because the rest of the bass isn't playing, but if I turn it on, you'll see. I'll have to turn this back down again so it doesn't sound stupid, but you'll see it. You see the way it kind of spikes up on its own after the bass, after each bass, when the bass isn't playing. I'll turn it up. It's almost like it automates itself, like you don't have to do these little up-down sort of clips, and it helps keep it kind of clean. But speaking of those little up-down clips, a little bit of shimmer reverb never goes amiss on your basses, always works. I put it on the bass bus most of the time and just kind of automate it towards the end of bars, or you could even do it in between little gaps like there. And it just kind of, it just works so well. It's almost like it builds a riser out of itself, like. And then without that, it wouldn't have that transition. hear the difference. It's like it's opening up and then kind of sucking you back in, ready for the next sound. And I'll use that same shimmer in the intro. I'll get rid of the synths just so you can hear that. And I just have it really high up and cut out the low end, or take the sub away. But yes, I think that's pretty much all there is to cover about the bass, really. I guess if there was sort of 3 important notes for someone to take away who's wanting to learn something from this is number 1, try use a separate sub where you can. It gives you a lot more control over the mix, and yeah, it's just a lot cleaner. Number 2, don't be afraid to mess around with macros and random LFO shapes and high pitch octaves and stuff, you know, all just from sine waves. Like, sine waves are your friend. Just because they look boring doesn't mean they have to sound boring, you know. And tip 3, make sure you do some long recordings of yourself sort of jamming around on a synth and just chop out what you like. So yeah, hope you found that helpful. Follow for more and keep an eye out for my next few releases. In a bit.